we ready? So this covers all the connective tissue. It's a very nice video. We'll understand better. Then we'll move on to the muscle tissue.
Continuous sheets of densely packed cells found in neighboring epithelial tissue. Connective tissue is primarily composed of a
Oh, that's exactly how it's coming. Oh, let's look once that is coming.
Unlike the continuous sheets of densely packed cells found in neighboring epithelial tissue, connective tissue is primarily composed of a non-cellular material called extracellular matrix. In the extracellular matrix, various fibers can be found within a non-cellular ground substance. Ground substance is the non-living, highly hydrated material produced by connective tissue cells, consisting primarily of protein and carbohydrate molecules. It acts as both a lubricant and a barrier. It may be viscous, as in blood, semi-solid, as in cartilage, or solid, as in bone. Also, in contrast to epithelia, the cells that do exist within connective tissue are not in direct contact with each other. Rather, they are scattered throughout the tissue. Three types of fibers strengthen and support most connective tissue. Collagen fibers, as seen in skin, are strong and stretch resistant. The thinner elastic fibers are flexible and resilient, as in the connective tissue in the wall of the aorta. And finally, reticular fibers form an interwoven framework for organs such as the spleen. All types of connective tissue originate in the primary embryonic germ layer called the mesoderm. In the developing embryo, the first type of connective tissue to emerge is mesenchyme. It contains spindle-shaped mesenchymal cells found within the ground substance. Adult connective tissues often contains mesenchymal or stem cells that can help repair damaged tissues. A second type of embryonic connective tissue is mucus, found only in the umbilical cord. Adult connective tissue is often classified in three broad groups: connective tissue proper, supporting connective tissue, and fluid connective tissue. Connective tissue proper includes subcategories loose and dense connective tissue. Variations in the proportions and properties of fibers and ground substance, along with varying numbers and types of cells, are the identifying factors determining classification of loose or dense tissue. There are three types of loose connective tissue: areolar, adipose, and reticular. Areolar connective tissue is the most widely distributed connective tissue, closely resembling its embryonic precursor, mesenchyme. Fibroblasts are the main cell contained in areolar tissue, and most of the volume of areolar tissue is made up of the ground substance. It also contains a loosely organized grouping of collagen and elastic fibers, as well as a large distribution of blood vessels. The watery ground substance cushions against shocks, and the loosely organized fibers ensure the tissue can be distorted without damage. Primarily composed of cells called adipocytes, fat is a primary energy store for the body. This tissue represents an average of 15 to 25% of body weight and is currently the most widely studied cell of connective tissue due to the growing worldwide epidemic of obesity. Adipose tissue is found throughout the body. Due to the swollen nature of mature adipocytes, there is little ground substance visible. Reticular connective tissue contains a unique network of reticular fibers, fibroblasts, and leukocytes. Found in the liver, spleen, and lymph nodes, this cell-line system creates a sponge-like structure in which cells and fluids are freely mobile. It slows down blood fluids so cells can perform their metabolic function. Fine, branching reticular fibers are evident throughout the tissue. Dense connective tissue is mainly composed of protein fibers, mostly collagen, and contains much less ground substance than loose connective tissue. In dense, regular connective tissue, such as tendons and ligaments, parallel bundles of tightly packed collagen fibers enable this tissue to resist stress exerted in a single direction. Collagen fibers are often stained pink or blue in histological specimens. In dense, irregular connective tissue, individual bundles of collagen fibers make up a scattered meshwork and appear in clumps, rather than in the parallel pattern seen in dense, regular connective tissue. This tissue provides resistance to stress from all directions, such as in the deep portion of the dermis. This gives strength to the skin and allows it to withstand applied force from any direction. Elastic connective tissue features freely branching elastic fibers in addition to packed collagen fibers. The elastic allows for stretching and then returning to normal shape, as in the vocal cords. Yellow elastic fibers will often be stained black in histological specimens. Because they protect and support soft body tissues, cartilage and bone are referred to as supporting connective tissue. The extracellular matrix in supporting connective tissue contains a ground substance that ranges from semi-solid to solid, as well as an abundance of protein fibers. Hyaline cartilage is the most common and plentiful form of cartilage in adults. It forms the temporary skeleton in the embryo until it is gradually replaced by bone. This cartilage is strong but still somewhat flexible. Histological samples, chondrocytes often occur in pairs and are distributed in lacunae. A perichondrium is evident. Elastic cartilage is similar to hyaline cartilage, but has a high concentration of elastic fibers, which make it appear yellow in fresh sections, but black in stained histological specimens. A perichondrium is also present. A good example can be found in the external ear. Fibrocartilage has coarse collagen fibers in its extracellular matrix. These densely interwoven fibers add to the extreme durability of this type of cartilage. Unlike hyaline and elastic cartilage, fibrocartilage lacks a perichondrium. Many histological specimens will show lacunae occurring in rows. Fibrocartilage found in the menisci of the knee joint acts as a shock absorber. Closely aligned with cartilage connective tissue, and perhaps the most remarkable connective tissue, is bone connective tissue. The histology of this tissue, as well as its mechanical and metabolic functions, are highly complex. We will highlight only a few distinct characteristics. Bone is more solid than cartilage and provides greater support, but both are capable of growth. In the case of bone tissue, internal remodeling is an active process over the course of a lifetime. Bone connective tissue is unique in that it is composed of calcified intercellular material, making the bone rigid and strong, but brittle. As the main ingredient of the adult skeleton, bone tissue supports fleshy structures, protects vital organs, and stores bone marrow where blood cells are formed. It also stores calcium, phosphate, and other ions that can be released in a controlled manner. Two types of bone connective tissue make up the bones of the body. Compact bone, which usually forms the hard outer shell of the bone, appears more solid than its counterpart, spongy bone. Compact bone is composed of small cylindrical structures referred to as osteons. Osteons consist of concentric rings of matrix lamellae surrounding a central canal. Small canals, referred to as canaliculi, radiate between lacunae that contain osteocytes. Spongy bone is found within the interior of the bone. The bone tissue forms an irregular latticework trabeculae that is lightweight yet strong. Osteocytes are located within the lacunae of the trabeculae. Osteons are not evident in spongy bone. Rounding out the wide variety of connective tissue is fluid connective tissue, or blood. It is made up of cells and cell fragments called formed elements, otherwise known as erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets. The erythrocytes transport oxygen and some carbon dioxide, while the leukocytes initiate and control immune response. Blood also contains dissolved protein fibers in watery ground substance where plasma is formed. Plasma transports nutrients, waste, and hormones throughout the body.
That video is on the blackboard as well, so you can watch it. So we'll just finish the where we're up to here.
No, the muscle
Yes,
tissue.
34.
Okay, so we're on to muscle. Okay.
Yes.
So muscle tissue is for movement of body parts. Remember that muscle is in one form like skeletal muscle. It's connected to the skeleton via tendons, so it helps us to control our movements. We've got the cardiac muscle, which is important. We find that in our heart. It's important for the contraction of the heart to move the blood around the body. And then we've got the smooth muscle. We find it in lots of internal organs and in blood vessels. It helps for the function of those organs in the blood vessels. Okay, so skeletal muscle we can control, so we call that voluntary, because we have control over it, conscious control. You know, you can control where you move, where you go. Cardiac muscle
Cannot control.
and smooth muscle we cannot control. We call this involuntary. We have no control over them. Okay. So, and as I mentioned before, these the muscles are made up of two fibers, actin and myosin, which help in the contraction of the cells. So, in the contraction of the muscle, which provides the driving force for the movement. So let's have a look at the skeletal muscle. So if we look at the structure of each type of muscle, we find that it's quite different. In skeletal muscle, we find these long cells. Have a look at that.
Yeah.
And you saw that in the lab as well, remember? Under the microscope.
No.
You haven't done the lab yet?
We'll do it next week.
You didn't take the histology lab?
We took it, but only
We
for
took
the
the
shapes and layers.
Okay.
But we didn't take the
Epithelium.
bones. and
Alright,
the
Just
muscle.
epithelium.
Okay, so I think it's in two parts, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay.
2 parts.
So the muscle you haven't done yet, but what you see is that you got these long cylindrical, that looks like cylinders, okay? You know what a cylinder is? If I cut through here, you'll see it's like that, okay? So if you look from there, it's like a cylinder. And you find in skeletal muscle, at the periphery, remember periphery now? What periphery is?
Yeah,
On the surface, on the
Yeah.
edge,
Yeah.
okay? On the edge of the cell, you find the nuclei. And what we see is that skeletal muscle, they have very long cylindrical cells and are multi-nucleated, okay? They have many nuclei. One cell can have many nuclei because during maturation of the skeletal muscle, many cells fuse together to form one big cylindrical cell, okay? So when muscle is being formed during the embryonic stages, you know, as you're developing, many cells, they fuse together to form this one large cell, which is multi-nucleated. That's why it has many nuclei.
So, Doctor, they merge together to become one cell.
To become one cell. And
And this cell has too many nucleus.
yes, multi-nuclear, because obviously each cell that is fusing is going to bring its nuclei.
Yeah.
Okay? So when many cells fuse together to form these giant or long cylindrical muscle cells, they are multinuclei because of that reason. The other thing is, you see these striations, this pattern of
Fibers.
stripes or whatever you want to call them. You see dark and white. So it's this is the actin myosin, okay? Arranged in dark, so actin dark, myosin light, okay? And it gives this what we call striated appearance. So the bands, and this is very characteristic of skeletal muscle. This sort of, if you see this under the microscope, this sort of structure, you would immediately know that it is skeletal muscle. So how you identify it? One, with these striations. Two, multinucleated cylindrical cells. So that's how you differentiate skeletal muscle from the other muscles. And as I mentioned, it's voluntary, means you have control over this.
Vaccine is the car.
Yes, so actin dark, myosin light, okay? Because you see here, many cells fuse together during embryonic development, okay? So you got during development inside your mother's womb, as the baby is developing, as the muscles is forming, cells for skeletal muscle fuse together. So you know, this could have been, you know, there's one cell here, another cell here. They fuse together and form this long cell, and that's why you see the cells have these peripheral nuclei. The reason they're peripheral, because most of the cytoplasmic space is taken up by the fibers, the actin and myosin fibers, which are very important for contraction, okay? So as I mentioned, so does that answer your question? So it's voluntary, okay? Voluntary means we have conscious control over it. So I can control my movement. I can walk here and then stop. So I have control over the skeletal muscles. So, and these are only activated by nerve impulses, okay? So coming from the brain. So my brain, if I'm walking down here, these muscles that are being controlled right now, signals from my brain are electrical impulses are sent through neurons to the muscles to contract in a coordinated fashion, so to give me that movement, you know, that I can move here, then back, turn around and move back. So they're activated by nerve impulses. Nerve impulses come from the brain, okay?
So,
Yes.
so the cylinder shape, is it only the fused cell or the layer, the whole layer?
So the one giant cell, one big cell, if you cut it here, if you cut a cross section through here, you will see like this. Okay? If you cut through here, so each one of these is one cell, okay? Yeah. Did you see? Remember in the lab we learned about longitudinal sections? So longitudinal, this is longitudinal, and cross section. So if you do a cross section, you'll see the individual cell. Here it's longitudinal because we want to see the multi-nuclei and the arrangement of the fibers. It makes it easier. But if you have a section of the muscle in the lab, look around, you might find somewhere there will be a cross section. You will see this cylindrical shapes, okay?
Okay.
Is that makes it clear for you? Okay. So we find this attached to bone and by tendons, okay? So you know all the muscles that are attached in your body that to the bone are known as skeletal muscle, okay? So it moves your head, you know, your neck, your arm, your legs, and so on, okay? These parts that you have control over that are you can move are all attached to skeletal muscle, okay? So the differentiating feature, remember, is that the multinucleated cells, they have these actin, myosin fibers, are important for the contraction. They're activated by nerve impulses on the brain, and you find them attached to bones via tendons, okay? So the second type of muscle is the cardiac muscle. We find this in the heart, okay? So it's only found in the heart. Nowhere else. When we compare this to the skeletal muscle, we find some similarities, and also there's quite a few differences between them, between the skeletal muscle and the cardiac muscle. So what we find in the cardiac muscle is that it has one nucleus, or nucleated. So each cell will have one nuclei, okay? And it's not, you don't find it in the periphery, okay, as we did before. So we find that the cells contain one nuclei, but the similarity is that it has striations, these striations, the actin and myosin. Remember that? It has the striations. So that's where the similarity ends, okay? So it has striation, those actin and myosin fibers in striated pattern, perpendicular to each other, okay? But in cardiac muscle, the cells are uninucleated, or they have one nuclei, and they are branched, okay? So if you have a look at this cell, one comes off here, then another branches off this way, okay? So they have these branches coming off. So can you see that? So they branched and they have striations, okay? One nuclei. The other difference is that they have these dark striations, okay? You see these darker striations in between the cells, where one cell ends and the other cell begins. We call these intercalated discs, okay? So here, intercalated discs. So these darker striations are intercalated discs. And remember, in an earlier lecture, I talked to you about gap junctions. You remember the gap junctions? We said that they actually, the channels of adjacent cells fuse together to form like a corridor for movement of ions and water.
Yeah.
So, and I said that in the cardiac muscle, this is very important for coordinated contraction of the muscle, okay? So the muscle tissue contracts at the same time, because you don't want one chamber contracting while the other is not contracting, and it won't pump the blood in a coordinated manner, okay? And we'll learn more about the contraction of the heart next semester, okay, when we do the cardiac system. But what is important is that these intercalated discs, okay, is actually where the membranes of two adjacent cells meet, and they have these gap junctions between them, and when you stain this tissue with these, different stains, they stain these dark colors, okay? So we call these intercalated discs. They're found between the cardiac muscle cells, okay? They're important for this. It acts as an electrical connection, okay? So the muscle contracts in a coordinated fashion, okay? The gap junctions. Now we haven't studied about the physiology of the contraction of the heart, but you probably will take this next year in physiology. But the electrical impulses, they're coming from a change in what we call the potential, where the cell becomes polarized or depolarized, depending on the number of ions, positive ions within the cell compared to outside of the cell, okay? So, for example, if you have a cell here, you have like 4 positive ions there and 1 positive ion outside. So compared to that, the inside of the cell is positive, while the cell considered negative, okay? All right? Because it has less positive ions, so it's more positive on the inside compared to the. So this is called the polarization or depolarization of these cells. But we're not going to take that. I'm not going to talk about this, okay? You will learn this later on. But this is important. These gap junctions are important in moving those ions from one cell to the other to get a coordinated contraction of the muscle cells, okay? As I mentioned, we don't have control over our heart muscle, so you can't stop your heart. You can't start it back up if it stops. So it's involuntary, so no control. We have no control.
Doctor,
Yes.
the gap junctions is moving the ions to.
Yeah, so you got one cell here, all right? Then you got the other cell there. In between it, we find the
Gap junction.
gap junction.
And they transfer the ions.
That's why this looks like very prominent between the cells. It looks like a dark, this is what
Yeah.
forms the intercalate. So ions in water can move across those channels.
Gap junctions.
Yes, those gap junctions. Remember the gap junctions between the cell, it forms actually a channel, remember?
Yeah.
It forms that channel, so it's like that.
Yeah.
So molecules can move in and out freely through the adjacent cells. So that is important for the cardiac muscle to contract in a coordinated fashion, so it can eject the blood out of the chambers. Okay.
Yeah.
If it doesn't do that, it will not eject the blood properly.
And not contract properly.
Yes, it won't contract properly. So these gap junctions between cells allow for a fast coordinated contraction between the cells. Okay.
It's called interrelated disc.
So it's this where we find these striations, these dark striations where the gap junctions are, it's called intercalated discs. Okay. So we have the normal striations. So these are the actin and myosin. Where we find the gap junctions, we see these dark striations only between cells. Okay, not within the cell. We call that intercalated discs. So just to recap, the difference between cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle is, in cardiac muscle we find only uninucleated cells, so they have only one nucleon. The cells are branched, okay, unlike the skeletal muscle where the cells are cylindrical and perpendicular to each other, okay, or parallel to each other, I should say.
Striated.
Yeah.
It's called striated also.
So this is called also, it also has striation. So the similarity is that they're both striated, okay?
Yeah.
But that's where everything ends between them. They're uninuclear, they have the intercalated disc, and they're branched, okay?
They're what, doctor? Yeah.
They're uninucleated, okay? That means they have one nuclei. They have these intercalated discs, they have these branched structure, okay? And they have the intercalated discs, which are the gap junctions. And the other difference is that it's involuntary, okay? And one more, this is not, they don't contract by nerve impulses, okay?
On their own,
They have their own tissue, specialized tissue, we call the atrioventricular nodes. They actually, there's two nodes, the synodal node and the atrioventricular AV node, or SA node. We'll learn about those next semester in the cardiovascular system. But those tissues found within the heart itself, they generate the electrical impulses, okay? It doesn't come from the nerves.
because that when the brain is dead, the heart is still beating.
Yeah, it can. So the brain can only increase or decrease the heart rate. It actually doesn't control its, yeah. Okay? So we find it in the walls of the heart which pump the blood, okay? So that's cardiac muscle. And the last one is the smooth muscle. Now there is differences between the other two here as well. And some similarities. So like the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle is also uninucleated. It has one nuclei, but the cells here are not branched like that. They're more in this parallel fashion where you find them, these long cells like that are tapered at the end, okay? So this is where, you know, they taper at the end, they are more pointy, okay? They have pointed ends. And you find that they have one nuclei, alright? So you find them aligned in circular fashion around blood vessels. So if you have a blood vessel here, if you have a look at it, you find that they lie around the blood vessel like that in a circular fashion. So they can control the blood flow, they can constrict. So if they contract, they can make this smaller, okay? So it can control you know, blood pressure, okay? And this type of muscle is involuntary as well. We don't control our blood vessels, you know, our blood pressure. We have no control over it. It's a one of those involuntary, you know, functions, autonomic functions. So we also have gap junctions between them as well, adjacent cells. So, but you don't see that dark striations here as well. So there is gap junctions between adjacent cells. There are cells next to each other, and we have no control over it. So we find this in the blood vessels. We also find it in the you know, the lots of the internal organs like the stomach, the intestines, the bladder. Many internal organs have smooth muscle around it. Okay.
It's gonna stretch also.
Yeah. So well, that stretching is from the elastic connective tissue, but these gives it the ability to move. So you know, when in your stomach you have some mechanical digestion, you get contractions of these smooth muscle, which cause the movement of the food, and also the movement of the food when you swallow the food through the esophagus. The esophagus connected to your stomach, it's got smooth muscle. So what we call peristalsis, these waves of contractions that push the food down into your stomach, okay? And again, we're gonna learn about that in more detail, about peristalsis, in the next semester when we're looking at the digestive system, okay? So for now, these type of cells, they're nucleated, okay? They have these long cells which are tapered. That means they have the pointy ends, okay? They have gap junctions between adjacent cells, and it's involuntary. We find it in, you know, internal organs and blood vessels. So, you know, the digestive tract, uterus, bladder, these internal organs, okay? And the blood vessels.
How it can reduce the blood? The blood vessel?
If it's around in a circular fashion, if it squeezes like that, contracts, what's gonna happen?
Yeah, okay.
Narrows the blood vessel.
Okay.
Then it can adjust blood pressure, blood flow,
Yeah.
okay?
Like it balance. When
So
you reduce,
yeah,
then it
yeah.
reduces.
If you can, you know, sometimes you want to block blood flow to some place. You know, it can do that. It has some what you call sphincters that are smooth muscle as well. But the details will come in the next semester of some of these things that we're studying here. But generally, we just mention these. Okay, we're not going to talk about how they work there. Okay. All right, so we're on to the nervous tissue, the final type of tissue. So this type of tissue is for communication, okay? The primary function of it. So we have two types of cells. We have these, the cells that actually have these transmit and generate the electrical impulses, so the neurons, or sometimes we call them the nerve cells. And we have these glial cells, or neuroglia, okay? These nourish, support, and protect the neurons. Most of the nervous tissue is composed of about 80 to 90%, okay, is neuroglia. Only about 10% is the actual neurons, okay, in the nervous tissue. So most of it is this neuroglia. So when we look at the structure of these, so the nerve cells or the neurons, we find that they have three different parts, okay? So this is actually a drawing of a nerve cell or a neuron. So we have the cell body here, which contains the cytoplasm and the nucleus, okay? These dendrites, these extensions that look like these, finger-like extensions that come off the cytoplasm, look like a tree. They actually pick up the transmission from a neuron before, so it joins to another neuron, okay? So you have multiple, so you'll have another neuron joined to this, okay? So it receives signals from other neurons, okay? So these extensions from the cell body. Then you have this axon. So once the signal is received, it passes through the axon. The axon you see is much longer. Now I don't know if there is. Did you see the nervous tissue under the microscope? So it's only showing a bit of it. So that is the axon of it. It's the longer portion. Sometimes this can extend like for 1 meter, 1.5 meter. Very long. And so this is where it moves the electrical impulse away from the cell body towards the terminal ends, okay? Whether it's going to be attached to muscles or some gland or whatever, okay? So the three distinctive parts are the cell body containing the cytoplasm and the nucleus and most of the organelles, the dendrites which receive the signals, electrical impulse from another neuron, and then passes it through the axon to other, where the effectors are, to muscles, to glands, whatever to contract, okay? Through long distance, yeah, because this axon is very long. Now, when we take the nervous system next semester, we're gonna talk in more detail about the different structures, okay? How they made, okay? So that's the neuron.
Dendrites receive the signal.
Yes, receive the signals, okay, from other neurons. And these axons, these long extensions, they transmit it from the cell body to long distances through other, muscles, to glands, to other tissues, okay, that require nervous control. So the second type of cell we find is in the most abundant, okay? This is the most abundant cells we find, the glial cells, or we call them the neuroglia. We find three types, okay? One type is for supplying the neuron with nutrients like oxygen and glucose and amino acids and so on. So they actually have connections to the blood vessels, pick up the nutrients, and they're connected also to the the neuron itself. So the neuron is not actually close to blood vessels, all right?
So the glial absorb the nutrients.
Yeah, and then transmit those nutrients to the neuron itself, okay?
Yeah.
So it helps to nourish it, okay? It gives it nutrients. Now the actual name of this type of cell, because they have these, it looks like a star, like the star, it's called astrocyte. So this type of cell that provides the nutrients and oxygen and removes the waste, it's called an astrocyte. So that's one type of glial cell, okay?
It's not considered as neurons.
No, they don't generate electrical impulses, the glial. Their function is to support, protect, and nourish the neurons, the ones that transmit electrical
Yeah,
impulses.
and what they did for blood.
So here it's going to pick up nutrients, oxygen, and supply it to the.
Okay.
So it nourishes, okay?
Feed the
Transmits the
Okay.
nutrients.
Nutrients, okay, and removes the waste and so on.
like channel to the nerves.
Yes, it's like a transport cell, okay? It's a cell that nourishes it, okay? This is a cell, actually a cell, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not nerves. It's not nerves.
No. The second type of cell, which actually it's surround and support, okay? So this type of cells you see here, you see these little,
Yeah. It covers the axon.
yes, we call this the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath, but I'm just gonna give you this information. You don't need to know this, okay? For this chapter, you're gonna learn this next semester, okay? But I'll tell you what they are. So they're made up of cells called two type of cells, depending on the location, okay? Oligodendrocytes or Schwann cells, okay?
These
So
are for support and the
This
protect.
one acts as an insulation of the axon, so the electrical impulses can pass through, okay?
Okay.
It's insulation, okay? It supports the cell, so the electrical impulses can pass through this. You know when you got the wire,
Yeah, you need to cover it.
you need to cover it with plastic or something, okay? This is like a lipid, lots of lipid. It covers the axon.
What's it called?
Oligodendrocyte is one of the type,
It's on the shield. Before
and
shield,
the other one is Schwann.
Schwann shield.
Okay, so there's two types, Schwann cell or oligodendrocyte, okay? The other one, this type of cell, it acts like a defense mechanism. It protects the cell from pathogens, okay? The neuron, so it doesn't get infected with virus and bacteria. They're called microglia, okay? So very small cells that help to protect, like they function similar to macrophages, okay? They're phagocytic, they engulf things and clean up the place, okay?
What is it called? Schwann?
Schwann cell.
Yeah, I think
Schwann.
I think that's how you spell it, okay?
Schwann cell.
So that's the three type of neuroglia, that help to surround the cell, support it, and protect it, okay? So it also gives it nutrients, okay? Is that the last? Okay.
So what's the third type?
Microglia. Microglia. Now, you don't need to know that for the. I just gave you that information.
Macroglia for nutrients.
For protection. Microglia is for protection. It's a defense.
Those two for the act as an insulator.
Yeah, so these, depending on the type, one is in the peripheral nervous system, the other one is in the central nervous system, okay? Peripheral nervous system is all outside of the spine and brain, okay?
Okay.
So one of them covers the peripheral nervous system neuron axons, and the other one in the central, which is the spine and the brain,
It's
okay?
for support.
Yeah, so it actually insulates the axon, okay? I don't know from memory, I forgot which one is which, okay? One of them is for the central nervous system, the other one is for the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so the location of this is obviously you find it in the nervous system, which is the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves, okay? So we got the brain, we got the spinal cord going down the vertebral column, okay, inside it, and all the nerves coming out of that, okay, to different parts of the body. This is the nervous system, the nervous tissue, okay. So we got the generation and transmission of electrical impulses. So that is like message, okay, information message from various organs. So to various organs, during digestion or during breathing, when you're breathing in and out, this is controlled by the nervous system. So the coordinated contraction of muscles to make sure that you get air in, and then you take out, you get oxygen, and you get out, expel carbon dioxide. Okay. So, or you're receiving some information from when you're seeing things, So,
Produce
insulin,
anything.
lots of things, in the body, various organs. So it's very important. And as I mentioned here, this forms the central nervous system, okay? The peripheral nervous system is all the nerves coming off it, okay?
The brain is the central, or all of them is central?
So the brain and the spinal cord is known as the central nervous system, okay? And the peripheral nervous system is these nerves coming off it, okay? Outside of the central nervous system, okay? So, and this is a very rapid form of communication. Next semester we're going to talk about the endocrine system. Is also has similar function to the nervous system, where it's used for communication. It's a messenger system, but it's much slower. Here you're talking about milliseconds. In the endocrine system, it could be minutes, okay, or hours before the effect can be seen. But in this case, because it's using electrical impulses, it's very rapid, very quick. When you touch a hot object, how quickly are you going to move your hand? Very quick, okay? You're not going to, if this was controlled by the endocrine system, your hand will be there for a long time. It probably cause a lot of damage before you remove it, okay? Endocrine system is also for communication.
Endocrine system.
Yeah, so this is here for communication, information and message, okay?
Yeah.
This is more rapid. It's very rapid. Its reaction time is in milliseconds, okay? From memory, the transmission is 400 meters per second. 400 meters per second. It's very fast. It travels in 1 second 400 meters. The electrical impulses. That's why it's very quick. Alright, so how are we doing for time? Oh, we don't got time. I was gonna do Kahoot, but alright, we're not gonna do Kahoot, okay? We're gonna answer these questions. Next week we will do Kahoot, okay? Beginning of the lesson. Alright, question number 1. Which one of the following is characteristic of an exocrine gland but not of an endocrine gland? C. Release its products into a duct, okay?
Yeah.
So remember that exocrine glands release products into ducts. Endocrine release into blood. So both of them produce hormones. They both generate and transmit. They don't do that. They release gland products into the blood. No. So only C. Okay.
B is for the endocrine.
B is
For endocrine.
nervous.
Endocrine not include communicating.
D is for endocrine. D is not transmit impulses. Endocrine doesn't transmit impulses.
Yeah.
It sends messengers. Okay. It's for communication, but it uses hormones instead of electrical impulses.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also for communication.
Yeah. Which one of the following is found directly beneath the cells of an epithelial tissue? Remember the epithelial tissue? What do you find? Basement membrane, okay? So, B, okay? Glial cells, okay? Remember the supporting cells, the nourishing cells, the protecting cells? Which one?
A.
A, they support, okay? They don't conduct, okay? And they're not muscles, they're not connective tissue. Right, which of the following has muscles with multi-nucleated cells, okay? The arm?
Yeah. For movement.
So in stomach we find smooth muscle. In the heart we find cardiac. In the intestine, smooth. So in the arm we find skeletal muscle. Everybody got that?
Yes.
Alright, true or false? Weight loss decreases the number of adipocytes in the body. False. They shrink, okay? The number don't change. The size changes, okay? So tendons and ligaments are skeletal muscle.
True. By the bones.
What's tendons and ligament?
No,
it's
it's only
connected.
tendons.
Connective tissue.
Yeah.
It's not skeletal muscle tissue.
Oh, connected.
The tendons only the skeletal muscle.
No, it's not skeletal muscle. It's connective tissue.
Yeah.
Because it's joint
Tendons
bone.
and ligaments are skeletal muscle tissue. Is that true?
No.
It's false.
Yeah.
Read the question. No. So in the exam, don't make this mistake you just made there. Okay? Read the question carefully before you answer it.
Okay.
This small mistake can make you have the wrong answer. Bones heal faster than cartilage. True or false?
True.
Remember, bones have more capillary blood vessels. Cartilage, no capillary, is very limited. So it'll heal in years. This can heal in weeks. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.